Robert Reich is like most economists. They say Republican policies are dumb because they are. The majority of economists are on the Democratic side. It isn't because that the universities are indoctrinating people and Republicans are not smart enough to find any evidence of it. It's more along the lines that Democrats actually create jobs and build a good economy. Now watch this clip, but there is one mistake Robert Reich clearly makes. The Fed is not actually trying to control inflation. The Fed is actively trying to destroy jobs, and they just about admitted to just that.
Secretary Reich, can you hear us?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Robert Reich. Yesterday, Fed policymakers continued their battle against inflation with a third straight supersized rate increase, warning that they will continue to raise borrowing costs. They assume that the underlying economic problem is a tight labor market, causing wages to rise and prices to rise in response. So interest rates and interest rate increases are necessary to slow wage growth. With due respect, this assumption is wrong. Recent wage hikes have not kept up with inflation. Most workers' paychecks are shrinking in terms of real purchasing power. Rather than causing inflation, wages are reducing inflationary pressures. The underlying economic problem, in addition to global problems, is not wage price inflation, it's profit price inflation. That is, corporations raising their prices above increases in their costs, using those cost increases as excuses to raise their prices and profits. Corporate profits are close to levels not seen in over a half century. Corporations have the power to raise prices without losing customers because they face so little competition. Since the 1980s, 2/3 of all American industries have become more concentrated. Grocery prices are through the roof, for example, largely because just 4 companies control 85% of meat and poultry processing, and 4 giants control 70% of grain. One corporation sets the price for most of the nation's seed corn. 2 firms dominate consumer staples. All are raising prices and increasing profits because they can. Meanwhile, Big Pharma is increasing drug prices like mad. The airline industry has gone from 12 carriers in 1980 to just 4 today, which are rapidly raising ticket prices. Wall Street has consolidated into 5 giant banks, raking in record profits on higher spreads. Broadband is dominated by 3 giant cable companies that are raising their fees, and so on. With inflation driven by these conglomerates raising prices to increase their profit margins, the major effect of interest rate hikes is just to depress wages and limit jobs. As the economy slows, workers are even less likely to get wage increases that keep up with inflation. And unemployment is going to rise. The Fed now sees the unemployment rate rising to 4.4% next year, up from 3.7% now. That would mean the loss of 1.2 million jobs. I urge Congress and the administration to take direct action against this profit price inflation, rather than rely solely on the Fed to raise interest rates and put the burden of fighting inflation on average working people who are not responsible for it. First, a windfall profits tax would help. A temporary tax on price increases exceeding the producer price index's costs of producing consumer goods. Congress should also direct the Federal Trade Commission to investigate whether price increases reflect added costs or opportunistic price gouging. Second, bold antitrust enforcement is essential. Even the credible threat of antitrust enforcement can deter corporations from raising prices higher than their costs. And third, as a backstop, price control should be considered. Now, it's true they have many disadvantages in terms of distorting markets, but the current inflation emerging from the pandemic is analogous to the inflation that occurred right after World War II, when economists argued for temporary price controls on important goods to buy time to overcome supply bottlenecks and prevent corporate profiteering. They should be considered now for the same reasons. In sum, the inflation we are now experiencing is not due to wage gains. It is due to increases in corporate profits. And it's excessive profits, not wages, that need to be controlled.
So, every time they bring up the supply chain, remember, corporate supply chains, the corporation, businesses' supply chains broke down because they fired everybody and shut them down to save money. Now they're trying to get them back up running because the economy is working. Why? Because Democrats fix things. Inflation isn't about wages. It's very specifically about corporate greed. Since they're not actually making as much money as they could be, and they found out that they could just raise prices, they're doing that to make money. And the only reason why they're able to do that is there is no more competition. The competition has been wiped out because they merged and were bought out. And now, businesses have to use the same business as everybody else. They can raise prices because it's not like you can go to anyone else. If the media actually reported on what was going on, Robert Reich probably wouldn't have made that mistake. He probably would have seen the Fed chairman sitting in front of Congress saying very specifically, his actions will not bring down gas prices, nor will it bring down food prices. They are specifically looking to destroy your job. Because even though the Fed's job is to... Now, I take this directly from the Fed's website to promote steady prices and full employment, to promote stability in the financial system, and to facilitate sustainable economic growth. Other duties include regulating of the banks and industry, and make sure consumers have access to the information they need in order to participate in the financial system. So, one of their jobs is to provide full employment. However, the Fed wants unemployment to be 4.4% next year. At least that's what they're predicting. And they are actively working to that by raising interest rates. They're looking to destroy the job market. Don't take my word for it. How about straight from the horse's mouth?
Acting Chairman, I appreciate the help of the Chairman this morning, and thank you for being with us, Chair Powell. So Americans are struggling with rising costs, and all eyes turn to the Fed. Last week, you announced that the Fed would raise rates by 0.75 percentage point, the biggest increase in nearly 30 years. So let's talk about what the Fed is and isn't doing when it raises interest rates to try to bring down inflation. Let's start with gas prices. The price of gas is up 40% since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Chair Powell, will gas prices go down as a result of your interest rate increase?
I would not think so, no.
Okay. That matters because gas prices are one of the single biggest drivers of inflation. Energy prices overall drove a third of the inflation last month, but the Fed's tools, as you say, have no impact here. So let's look at another necessity, food. Price of groceries is up nearly 12% this year. Americans feel the pinch. No matter how much groceries cost, people still got to eat. Chair Powell, will the Fed's interest rate increases bring food prices down for families?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Okay. So a Fed increase won't bring down these prices. And why? Because rate hikes won't make Vladimir Putin turn his tanks around and leave Ukraine. Rate hikes won't break up monopolies. Rate hikes won't straighten out the supply chain or speed up ships or stop a virus that is still causing lockdowns in some parts of the world. So let's talk about what interest rate increases can do. Chair Powell, you said last week that interest rate increases, quote, moderate demand. Can you just explain a little more about what that means?
Sure. So we think about interest rate increases as affecting financial conditions and then the economy through three broad channels, the first of which is interest-sensitive spending. So that's durable goods and automobiles and things like that. So interest rates go up, people's demand for as a result of higher interest rates will moderate or decline so that supply and demand can get into better balance. The second channel is just asset prices generally. Interest rates, as they go up, will cause asset prices to moderate across the economy, and people spend a little bit less out of their lower level of wealth. The third channel is the exchange rate, which is really just another asset price, and that just basically as the dollar strengthens. As rates go up, the dollar would strengthen, which would tend to drive.
So I appreciate this, and I do. I appreciate the explanation. But let me just see if I can just put a little more plain vanilla explanation of what's going on here. If I understand what you've said and what economists are saying across the board, is that when you raise interest rate, there's going to be less money to invest, and that is, it's going to dampen business investment. Is that a fair statement?
I think the idea is to moderate demand
to invest
so that it can be in better balance with supply.
Okay.
And
So
the current
it's going to make it
situation,
more,
demand is well in excess of supply in some areas of our economy.
more expensive to invest, which in turn is going to throw workers out of work. And when they're out of work, they have less money to spend. So I get that rate increases stop companies from spending money to build new plants or to buy new trucks or to hire new people. Right, Chair Powell? When money's more expensive, they're less inclined to do that. I think that's what you just said on asset pricing, right?
Well, in the labor market, you have, as you know, you have a situation where there's a shortage of workers, and there are two job vacancies for every person who's actively looking for work. So part of this is to get the labor market back into balance.
Well, I appreciate you call it back into balance. What I'm trying to get at, though, is what does the tool of raising rates do? And part of what you just said is that it increases, in effect, the cost to invest, to buy those trucks or new plants or to hire new people. The reason I raise this and the reason I'm so concerned about this is rate increases make it more likely that companies will fire people and slash hours to shrink wage costs. Rate increases also make it more expensive for families to do things like borrow money for a house. And so far, the cost this year of a mortgage has already doubled.
Yes. Nothing the Fed will do, nothing the Fed is doing, will bring down inflation of gas or your groceries. They're specifically looking to tank the job market. Because if the job market goes, people will spend less. So this failed system that corporations have on the supply chain that is causing temporary inflation, which they are using to price gouge, will go away because people won't have money to spend. Now this goes back to the age-old question, why does the Fed care more about inflation and corporate profits than doing their job providing for full unemployment? Because the Fed has been captured by the right wing. Now we got to ask ourselves, does the Fed favor Republican presidents? It most certainly does. However, you can't prove that there is a bias. But even though that the majority of economists are on the Democratic side because Democratic states have the big cities because they run good economies and keep crime low. The Fed has always raised rates for Democrats and kept them artificially low for Republicans. Yes, some people complain that the Fed hasn't done enough to help Republicans, but then again, no matter what the Fed does, Republicans will always complain. The media is out to get Republicans. How? Because the media won't hold them accountable, so they all go crazy. There's a secret conspiracy theory. The media has been allowing Republicans to do whatever they want, and it doesn't hold them accountable. And they go more wackadoo. Funny. Great conspiracy, isn't it? It could be just a coincidence that the Democrats do better with the economy, so the Fed always raises it under Democrats. True. Democrats are much better with the economy, and, well, George W. Bush and Twitler both crashed the economy. So, maybe. I would say that the Fed is a tool for the rich and should be treated as such. It also has never been able to cool off the economy without crashing it within 2 years. So the fact that they still get away with saying it, that this time it's going to work, and no one asks them the rational question, how is it going to work this time when it has never worked before? See, that's the question we should really put to these people and get them to tell us what full unemployment means. Because clearly, the current unemployment is not high enough to satisfy full employment. Now, is it? So, let's hope that they fail once again, because the stock market was detached from historical norms during Twitler's pandemic. Maybe business leaders have learned that history is only that way because people said it should be that way. So people feared that there was going to be a recession, and so they fired people because of the fear of the recession. Well, not considering what happens after the fact. We're currently in the supply chain issue because businesses messed up. They fired people and shut everything down. And then they tried to start right back up because Democrats jump-started the economy, and it is right back where it was before Twitler crashed it. And now businesses are having a hard time getting the supply chain in order, and they're ripping people off in the meantime. So maybe people have learned that the historic trend is only that way because people acted that way. It could be that people have finally realized the truth. Acting that way is dumb because corporations are making a fraction of the profit that they could if they didn't mess up the supply chain. Maybe you shouldn't cut your labor force and head off an imagined downturn because you're going to mess up the supply chain. Businesses aren't making as much profit. Yes, they are price gouging, but what would happen if store shelves were full? Gas wasn't eating into people buying stuff? And slamming the economy into the ground in the first place might make a mistake. How about we learn? The Fed can't always do what it claims. Or, it has never once been able to do what it claims. The stock market will go up until the end of the United States. And maybe, just maybe, having the Fed try to crash the job market isn't good for the economy. So if you like those videos please help. The YouTube algorithm is horribly biased against, progressives. And the Republicans have massive amounts of money just to buy it off. So every time you like, every time you put a comment down below, helps us out. So like, subscribe, and if you really want to help the environment, down below is a link to a GoFundMe page where it has a brand new power generation that is 0% carbon emission and one of the cheapest productions of electricity the world has ever had. So go down, help us out.